Today, you are going to learn how to build an extremely powerful, enterprise-ready Laravel to Vue integration, step by step. In fact, this integration has allowed me to commit PHP data to the vuex store before we ever create our first Vue instance. It has also allowed me to integrate Laravel Blade templates with Vue templates seamlessly, using both functionality from Blade and Laravel interchangeably. And most importantly, above all else, it allows for the easy setup of code splitting, something we will cover in this video. Now, I should warn you, I'm not going to cover generic information like how to install Laravel or exactly what the vuex store is. There's plenty of videos out there on this stuff. Instead, you are going to learn how to integrate Laravel and Vue in an extraordinarily powerful way, step by step, starting now.
Step 1, install Laravel. So just get the default Laravel installation going. And if you are in version 6.something.something, you might also have to install the Laravel preset, a part of the default docs. So yeah, install Laravel, install the Vue preset if you need to. Otherwise, it will come with Vue installed. Step 2, I will link to this package below. This package is where all of the magic will happen. It is called Vue.js Service Container. So we're going to install this package. Just like that. Let's install and let's check out step 1 and 2. So the first part is we're going to need to go to our entry point. I have it set up so the entry point is main.js as well as this example. We're going to have to import Vue, make the service container, register the service container globally, and use that container as a Vue plugin. So step 1, import Vue from Vue. Step 2, import make service container from Vue.js service container. Step 3, register our container as a global window property and create the container. If we want to pass in some default JS right here, we can, just a default object. That can be utilized by our service providers later on. I'm going to leave it empty. Step 3, use the container as a Vue plugin. Okay. So that's step 1 and 2. Step 3, inject content into the container. So notice that this brings us back to example.blade.php. And it's saying inject JSON encoded backend data. So let's grab this script right here. And let's go to our version of example.blade.php, which is actually our app.blade.php. The first step is import that main.js script. Second step is inject JSON encoded data. So let's try this out. If we go to config and we go to app, you'll notice it has all of these properties defined in PHP. And if we were to go to our routes, we went to web and we did die and dump config, and then we'll do app just like that, what are we going to get? We're going to get all of this: name, environment, debug, URL, asset URL, time zone, etc., etc. Some pretty useful stuff to have on the front end. So what if we, instead of dying and dumping there, we went back to app.blade.php and we injected that app configuration directly into our JavaScript? Well, we can do that. We're going to do add JSON, the Blade directive add JSON encode, config app. Okay. Now, if we go to right here, cannot read add backend content, we also need to run npm run watch to make sure everything is properly being compiled and watched as we make our updates. So once that is compiled, go back to our Laravel. There we go. So notice we have passed in, and we can prove that we passed in by doing context.content our PHP data into our container. Okay, so that's pretty cool, but what can we do with it? Well, step 3 says create a new file called container service providers. We're going to skip that for now. Instead, we're going to go straight to the launching of our service container. So what does service container, what happens when we launch our container? Well, notice right now, if we go back to our application, we go to Vue. We don't have any Vue components. We don't have the Vue instance. We have the global Vue API, but we don't have any Vue instance. We haven't mounted Vue to our DOM yet. So by default, when we launch our container, and I just did a hard reload on the page, it will launch a Vue instance to the element with an ID of app. So we have mounted an instance of Vue to the element with an ID of app. We can prove this by doing query selector app, and then we can actually, so that's the app element, and we can get the Vue instance the container mounts to the element with an ID of app. Now within our service providers, we can actually update this and say, hey, we want to mount to, an element with the ID of hello world, or an element with an ID of about us page. So we don't have to mount the app, but by default, it will mount the app, and it will give that Vue instance, the root Vue instance, the name of Vue service container. So the containers launch method does a lot more than just launch our instance. It actually uses the service providers, which is step 4, creating service providers. So here's how we're going to do this. If you notice, in step 3, it has this service provider script. So let's go to our app.blade. Right after we add our backend content, we want to add a new script. We're going to call this script, let's just call it asset is js/service providers. Just like that. Okay. Now to get the script to properly work, we need to go to webpack.mix.js. We need to do .js equals resources.js service providers. .js, and we want to output that also to the public JS directory. Then we actually want to go to resources.js. We want to add a new file and call that service providers.js. Okay. So we're going to want to bump down our npm and bump it back up to make sure that that webpack catches the fact that we added a new file called service providers. Now if we go back here to step 4 within our package, you'll see that it has this object, these two objects actually. We can provide a service to our container, and we can access our container from anywhere because it's registered to the window. So for example, instead of doing that syntax, we can do this, register, and then we can do container provide example service. Now check this out. If we reload our page, nothing new happens. Well, what if we go in here and we go to register and we go console.log context? Well, it logs. It actually goes through the registering, and you'll notice that each of these hooks, the register, boot, and afterLaunch, they all have a context object. They all have a different context or different things they have access to. So for example, the register hook has access to the global Vue API, has access to the root instance options. So the root instance is this. It has a Vue, the name of the root instance is Vue service container. Well, the register context has access to root. So if we wanted to, we could deconstruct this given register provider hook. We could get root, and we could do root.set. We'll do name equals welcome page. And check this out. We just changed the name of our root instance by hooking to the register hook. Now, register and boot have the same context. Their objects are the same. afterLaunch, though, has a different context, console.log we'll do afterLaunch context. Boot console.log boot context. Check this out. Notice that boot has Vue, the global Vue API, the root instance that will be mounted to our DOM, the backend content we passed in, and this use function. Register has the same context by default. afterLaunch has all of those same properties plus the app, the actual app that we mounted. This component right here that is mounted to our DOM, because afterLaunch, the hooks for those services, the afterLaunch hook on any service is triggered after we mount our Vue instance to our DOM. After we mount a root Vue instance to our DOM, to be specific. So it has this extra property in this context. Now I want to point you guys to the first step where you actually start to see the bigger picture of things, where everything starts to come together. You'll notice that the service providers also have this use property within each context object. And it's actually a function. Every single service provider hook has this. So check this out. This is just a callback function, that allows us to actually append or add to the context. Added context variable. So we are adding an example property to our context with the value of added context variable. So what's that do? Well, notice, look at right here, root content Vue use. Well, now we have root content Vue use, but we also have example added context variable. So we can actually provide context to our service providers. So what makes this so powerful is we can actually add this, and within our second service provider, within our example service 2, check this out. Our register hook now also has access to this example property. How cool is that? So we can actually extend our service provider context. The last thing I want to show you guys, and by the way, if you go to the package, the context object deconstructed, the default properties, it will show you which provider hooks have access to what. The global Vue API instance, the root Vue instance, the mounted app, the content injected, and the use function. Here are the hooks based on any provider. There is also one more method that any service provider can optionally add, and that is when. When should we use this service provider? So for example, if we were to use return true, which it returns true by default, but in the second one we were to say when equals return false, check this out. It only runs the first service provider. But if we were to set this to true, when to run the service provider, it runs them both again. So now that we have a pretty basic understanding of what's going on with the service providers, let's go in and actually start implementing this powerful integration. So step 1 is I'm going to go to my webpack config. And I'm going to add a couple of aliases. So first we need to import the path object. And then we need to add this .webpack_config method to Laravel Mix. Now remember, Laravel Mix is just a Fluent wrapper around Webpack. We can actually hook into the default Webpack configuration using this Webpack config method, and then just pass in a normal Webpack config object. Now I'm going to resolve two aliases, the service alias and the component alias. The service alias is going to point to a directory called services, and the components directory points to components. Now let's go to service provider and let's empty out any providers we currently have. Okay. Now we need to bump down npm and reboot npm so it catches those aliases. Now if we reload, we're still mounting our instance, but we're not doing anything else. So the first thing I want to do is let's add a welcome page service.js. Okay. Now we want to just do container.provide. We want to register a Vue component globally. So we want to do Vue component welcome page equals welcome page. Next, we need to import welcome page from @component/welcome page. But as you can tell, we don't have a welcome page component yet. So let's create it. Now, we're going to create a Vue file to start off with. Just need template div h1 welcome to our Laravel to Vue integration. Next, we're going to add the script. We're going to export default. We're going to call it welcome page. And then we're going to just add a data property called title. And then this title will just be welcome to our Laravel to Vue integration, etc., etc. And then we're going to replace this with the title. And of course, we also need to return that data object. Okay. So, if all works well, we're importing our welcome page component. We're providing it as a service. The only purpose of this service is to add a global welcome page component. Next step is we need to actually require that file. So we'll do @service/welcome page. And let's refactor this, and let's just call it welcome page since it's already in the services directory. Let's require welcome page. Okay. So that should have properly booted up. Now what do we want to do with this? Well, let's go to welcome.blade, and first let's just replace this with welcome page. Let's reload our page. Welcome to our Laravel to Vue integration. Notice that our Vue service container now has our welcome name component. But what if we want to use PHP inside of the template section itself? Wouldn't that be cool? So for example, let's do this. Let's go to our routes. Let's go to web. And then we'll do title equals backend title, or title created in PHP. And then we'll go to our resources.js, and let's actually pass that through as well. That's probably important. Compact title, just like that. And then let's go here and let's do title created within JavaScript or JS or Vue.js. Okay. Once we have done that, let's change this from a welcome page.vue to a welcome page.js file. Let's completely get rid of this template right here. And instead of exporting a Vue file, we're now exporting a Vue.js file. So our services is importing the welcome page from @component/welcome-page.js. It is registering that as a Vue component as welcome page. But we don't have a template, right? So if we just reload our page, we're going to get an error. Module build failed. No such file or directory welcome-page.vue. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go back to our services and we need to import .js. Then we'll go back to our page and reload. And then we'll get another error. Failed to mount component. Template or render function not defined. So this is where it gets extraordinarily cool. Vue has this thing known as Inline Templates. An inline template just says, hey, we want to define our script within this .js file, within the component.js file we want to define our script, but we want to inline our template. We want to define our template within our blade file itself. So what's cool about this is we can actually do at title, that will be the blade title. Title created in PHP. And if we want to go back here and we want to add a method, we'll do methods equals log message. We'll do console.log message. We reload our page, and actually we need to add that method to our template. Then we'll do h1 at click equals log, and then we're going to do test. Okay, so now when we click on this title, our Vue.js functionality still works. But let's take this a step further. What if we want to actually use the JS title, the Vue.js title, and we want to use the Laravel blade title? Well, we can do this. Laravel has the special directive called @verbatim. And all this does is this says, hey, blade, ignore these mustache braces. Ignore anything between these two tags, right? So @verbatim, @inverbatim. And we'll do h2, we'll do @click equals log JS title clicked. We'll change this to PHP title clicked. Close out that h2 tag, go back here. Check this out. JS title clicked. Title created within Vue.js. PHP title clicked. Title created within Vue.js and title created within our blade route. So we can even take this a step further. @verbatim tells Laravel blade to ignore everything inside of the @verbatim tags. But what if we just want to ignore just the curly braces? We don't really need to ignore the rest. Kind of verbose. We don't need to do all of that. So Laravel blade also has the shorthand for verbatim, which is this @tag. This @tag says, hey, Laravel blade, just ignore this line. Just ignore everything on this line after this @ symbol. So if we reload our page, title created within Vue.js, title created within PHP, everything still works. And we have successfully integrated Laravel and Vue.js templates within a single template. Alright, so let's move on to some more advanced examples. For example, first let's go down to the service providers and actions example and use the vuex store example. So first we need to go over to vuex store and we need to install vuex. Let's do npm install vuex save. Next, what I like doing is I will add for each root level directory within my JS directory, I'll add an alias. So let's do that now. We'll call this one store and resolve that to directory and then resources JS store. Okay. Then, of course, we need to actually create that directory. So the vuex store is going to have this skeleton. So let's create index.js. It's going to have modules. We have no modules. It's going to need to import state, actions, getters, and mutations. So let's do new file state.js, import default, do that, we'll do file mutations.js, we'll do file actions.js, and we'll do file getters.js. Okay. So we have the skeleton of our vuex store. So let's go back to our example. So it looks like what we need to do is we need to create a new service. And so let's call this one, let's go right here. Let's just copy that verbatim. Go to services, create a new file, and let's call it vuex.js. And then we want to import our store object from app store. And that will just get the store index. That will get this file. So next, we need to first register vuex as a plugin. Then we need to create the new vuex store based on our store object. Step 3, we need to actually set the vuex store to our root instance. And step 4, we want to use the vuex store within our context. Use store within container provider context. Okay. We'll get rid of that for now. So let's go back to our service providers and let's add the vuex store service before our welcome page service. And we'll call the service vuex, just like that. Now we need to go back to our terminal and we need to boot up our watcher. So what we're about to go over is actually how to commit mutations to the vuex store using PHP data before we ever launch our Vue instance. Okay, so now we're properly watching. So we have created our vuex service provider. It registers the vuex as a plugin in Vue. It creates our vuex store, it's set to the root instance, and we use it within our context. Then we import the service provider to our service provider's file using require. And if everything was done properly, then we should have a vuex store, which we do. Now, the problem is our vuex store is empty. So let's do this. Let's add store, let's add state. Now let's just call this app. We'll just give it a title and we'll just say example, just like that. Now let's reload our page and let's go to our state. And we have state app title. If you remember from earlier, we are actually getting this config app object, and within our app.blade.php, we're passing in that PHP associative array to our container. So what we can do is we can actually go to our welcome page, and since we are using our store within our context, we can get our vuex store, and we can get our backend content. Now before we move forward, we need to add a mutation. A mutation is used, you can commit mutations to change the vuex store state. So we want to commit a mutation on our app property that is on our state using content. So let's do state.app equals content. Just like that. So now we have state, which is by default has title. Let's get rid of that. Let's just make this empty. And we have a mutation. Our goal is to pass in our PHP data and mutate the state using our PHP data before we ever mount our Vue instance to the DOM. So we have our store. We want to commit a mutation. That mutation we are committing is app. We know that because we defined our mutation here. And we want to pass it our backend content. And with any luck, our vuex store should properly load with all of our backend content. Now you do need to be careful with this because you can pass in backend content, like you probably shouldn't pass in your key here, and accidentally give people access to data you don't want to. So be careful what you pass from the backend. But that goes with any, Blade template or anything. So guys, that is how you properly register your vuex store, commit a mutation on your vuex store using PHP data before we ever even mount the vuex, or before we ever even mount our Vue instance to the vuex store. Eliminates several race conditions, extremely powerful. Alright, so let's speed things along a little bit. Let's cover examples 2, 3, and 4 all at one time. So first, let's create a global event bus. So then we're going to do services equals new file events.js. we're just going to do container.provide register, and then all we want to do is go down here and do that. So all we're saying is, one, create a global event bus on the container. So container.event equals new Vue. Then we're just creating aliases for emit, on, off, and once. So fire, listen, forget, listen, once. Then we're also adding it to the Vue prototype. So check this out. What's really cool about this is we can actually go in here, and once we add that global event bus, we can do this.event.listen for log, and then we can do this.log, just like that. So we're saying listen for the global event, and this we can use this.event on our Vue instance because we added the events to our Vue prototype. Next, we actually need to go to our service provider and require our event service. Then, to see this working in action, we can go up here. We can go container.event.fire hello world. Log hello world. And there we go. We get our console.log. And so yeah, guys, we can actually trigger reactive events within Vue outside the scope of Vue because we register a global event bus that is also registered on the Vue prototype. Pretty cool stuff. Next, register global Vue filters. Okay, so this one's pretty cool. So let's go right here and let's add new file. It's going to be filters.js. Container.provide. Let's do and boom, boom. Okay, so we just added a capitalized filter. So what is a filter? Well, a filter, if we go to our welcome.blade.php, just says, hey, we want to take title and we want to pipe it through our capitalized filter. But what's that do? Well, if we go back to filters, it takes whatever we're piping through, in this case title, and is going to make it capitalized. It's going to capitalize it. So then we need to go back to our service providers, and we need to require @service/filters, just like that. And then if we go to welcome page, notice this is currently lowercase, but if we go back here and we reload our page, it is now capital. So that is filters. Next, a global Vue directive. So a global Vue directive is basically what we want to be able to do is we want to do, okay, instead of this, let's do vhref equals google.com. So whenever they click on this element, we want to redirect them to whatever URL we have passed in to this directive. V and then href being the directive. So let's do directives.js, container.provide, Vue directive, href, it accepts an element, binds, and a vnode. So when the element that we add the directive on is clicked, we want to redirect the window location to the binded value. This is our element, this is our directive, so the directive is added to the h2 element, and our binded value is the string which points to google.com. Next, we need to actually import that provider, so we can do @service equals directives, just like that. Reload our page, and then when we click this, we'll be redirected to Google. So that's a global directive. Global Vue components. So we actually already did example 5. We added a global component within our welcome page service. So if we go right here, welcome page, Vue.component welcome page. It just makes it so we don't have to import everywhere. And we can access welcome page from anywhere within the element where we mount our Vue instance. Alright, so the next example is going to be adding the Vue router using the service container. So let's do this. Let's start off by installing the Vue router. Just like that. Next, let's go to our webpack.mix.js. We're going to add another alias. Let's call this @routes. And do path.resolve directory name resources/js/routes. Just like that. Next step is we obviously need to create our new routes directory with a new file called index.js. So after that, let's do export default, and we're going to do an array, and this array is going to have two objects. These two objects are going to represent routes. The first one is going to be welcome, and that's going to be the name is welcome. The next is going to be the path. The first property is the name, the next is the path. It's going to be /welcome. Then we're going to do name equals dashboard, and then we're going to do path equals /dashboard. Okay, so now once we have all of that set up, what we want to do is we want to do npm, we'll clear that out first, npm run watch. Now, we're going to boot that up, and now we're going to go back to our service container, and we're going to copy this provider in. Just like that. Then we need to go to services. We're going to add a new provider, and we're going to call this router.js. Then we're just going to copy that over verbatim, except we're going to change ./routes to @router. And I believe that is what we called our alias was router. Nope, we called it routes. From @routes, just like that. Okay. So once all of that is set up, let's go back to our right there. And we actually forgot the step of importing the router. So we'll do that right after vuex @service/router. Just like that. Now let's do a hard reload. Let's go to Vue, and let's go to our routing. Okay, full path, full path. So our router is properly booted in. We need to go and get our router view. Now within our router view, we can go to this welcome.blade.php, and we can just go, okay, here's our router view. Now we can go to welcome. We're currently on our welcome route. We can go to dashboard, currently on our dashboard route. Just like that. I was cool with the router, and to be honest, I opt out of using the router because I like having PHP. But what's cool with the router is after launch, you can hook into our router. We can do router.push, and then we can do name equals welcome. So if we reload our page, it will force us to the welcome page. If we were to put dashboard, and we reload our page, we land on the dashboard page. So we can actually hook into our router, and depending on what we want to depend on, it could depend on backend context, we could route the user to a specific page within our front-end spa router. So that's some pretty cool stuff you can do with the router. Next, let's talk about probably the most powerful aspect of this Vue service container. The ability to code split. Now, the definition from Google for code splitting is this. Modern sites often combine all of their JavaScript into a single large bundle. An alternative to large bundles is code splitting, which is where JavaScript is split into smaller chunks. This enables sending the minimal code required to provide value up front, improving page load times, and loading what you need on demand. So, how does this look in action? Well, we can always use that when hook, but we're still technically loading that JavaScript. We want to avoid loading the JavaScript we don't need. And this is very easy because we're using services. So we can just require or register the services that we need. So this example right here says change container service providers to global service providers. Add a dynamic page or a feature-specific route, and add a script responsible for page or feature-specific service providers. Okay, so this is going to take place in 2 steps. Actually, more than 2 steps. It's going to be a few steps, but it's going to be really powerful. First thing we want to do is we want to name our route. Next, we want to go to app.blade. And then right below service providers, we want to do script source equals asset. We want to do JS slash dot route current route name. And we want to do .js. Just like that. So, on the welcome page, this is going to return. On the asset page, this is going to return on the welcome page, this is going to return JS slash welcome.js. Just like that. That's what we want. Next, we want to go back here, and we want to add a new entry point. Resources /js / welcome.js. Next, we want to output that to the public JS directory. Finally, we want to go back to our services, and we want to first ask ourselves, okay, if we go to service providers, vuex, the Vue router, events, filters, directives, those are all global. But do we really want our welcome page to be global? Not really. It doesn't make much sense. So let's remove that. Let's go to our welcome page provider. And let's completely remove this, delete the welcome page provider from there, and add a new welcome.js file. And we're going to paste our welcome provider within this file. Now, if you remember, we added that webpack.mix, so now welcome.js is also going to be output to the public JS directory. And then we are going to dynamically load that JavaScript file based on the current route name, which we define here. So now that we have all of that set up, let's boot down our npm, let's reboot it up. And let's go to our Laravel project. Let's go to the network tab. Notice right now we load main.js and then serviceproviders.js. Let's reload the page. And now we actually load main.js, serviceproviders.js, and then welcome.js. So anything specific to the welcome.js page will only be loaded on the welcome page. Now there's a lot more powerful ways to code split than this. This is just a makeshift example just to explain the concept. Webpack and Laravel Mix actually allow us to code split in different ways. But I'll let you guys look into that one. Just to prove this example and to get it through, we'll do one more. And this is going to be information equals, and we'll just do company information. Then we'll do return view about compact information. Okay. Then we want to give this a route name of about. Next, we want to go to our resources, JS. We want to add an about.js file. About.js will be our second split. Welcome is our first split. About is our second split. Next, let's just completely remove this store and content. We don't need the app information on the about page for whatever reason. Next, let's create a new about us component, which I have created here already. Then we want to go back to our about us page. We want to import about us from component about / about us.js. Next, we'll replace this about us this welcome page with about us. Then we will actually go down here to our views. We'll copy this over verbatim, and we'll create a new about.blade.php. If we go back to our web.php file, we're returning the view about. That's why we're making an about.blade.php. Then we will remove this welcome page with the about us page. Finally, we will pass in, well, first let's prove this works. Then we'll pass in information as a prop from PHP directly into Vue. The last step is, of course, we need to actually create the new entry point, which is going to be resources/js/about.js. And then we need to output that to public.js. And then recompile or reboot npm so it catches those changes. So now if we go back to our Laravel project, and then we go /about, and then we go to our network tab, we are properly loading main.js, service providers, and then about.js. We have properly split. But if we go back to our welcome page, well, service providers welcome.js. We are splitting off our code. So let's go back to about, and let's actually go and pass in the information that we pass in from the backside, information, and let's pass it in as a prop. So we want to do information equals information. Just like that. Okay. Company information. So we have properly passed in our PHP as a prop, and we will actually use information on the front end, just like that. And then in our H2, we will use the information on the back end. Again, integrating our Vue.js and our Laravel Blade PHP templating systems. Company information, company information. Again, we are using both PHP and Vue.js to output the same information. So guys, that is code splitting in a nutshell. Very, very, very powerful tool for expanding and creating extraordinary stuff with Laravel and Vue together and making it maintainable, expandable, and giving it the capability to integrate within huge, huge enterprise scale applications.